The party was in full swing, the kind of gathering that was the epitome of wealth and success. The hum of conversation mixed with the clink of glasses and the soft strains of a jazz band playing in the corner. It was one of those perfect summer evenings where the air seemed to hum with the promise of endless possibilities. The house stood as a testament to its owner's success, a sprawling modern structure of glass and steel, nestled on the edge of a quiet suburban neighborhood. The windows caught the fading light of the setting sun, reflecting the lavish interiors that sparkled under the glow of designer chandeliers. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with the scent of expensive perfume and the faint sting of alcohol, wafting through the air as elegantly dressed guests moved in clusters. Their voices rose and fell like a tide, some speaking in soft murmurs, others laughing uproariously. To the casual observer, it was the picture of celebration, a moment of triumph shared with friends. But to those who knew the undercurrents of the gathering, there was something more lurking beneath the surface, an air of tension that, though unnoticed by most, was impossible to ignore for those with a sharp eye. At the center of it all stood Mark, the host. Tall, with a chiseled jawline and a confident smile, he was the embodiment of success. His presence demanded attention, and with his polished manner and easy charm, it seemed as though he had everything a man could want: wealth, influence, a beautiful wife, and a thriving career. His every word was measured, and he moved through the party with an air of authority, making sure to engage with everyone, always with a reassuring smile that made people feel important, valued, and understood. His wife, Claire, stood by his side, as she always did at these events. She was the quintessential picture of grace, poised and composed, her beauty quiet yet undeniable. Her presence, though less overtly commanding than Mark's, was no less striking. She wore an elegant dress that seemed to shimmer in the light, and her eyes, though bright, betrayed a sense of weariness, a lingering sadness that not even the most discerning of glances could easily uncover. For all the beauty that radiated from her, there was a certain fragility that surrounded her. Mark's hand rested lightly on her arm, but it seemed more out of routine than affection. Their marriage, to an outsider, appeared flawless, a model of perfection that one might envy. But anyone who took the time to observe the small, almost imperceptible details might have noticed the tension between them. The way Claire's smile never quite reached her eyes, how she seemed to withdraw when the crowd became too much, how she never lingered too long in Mark's embrace. Then there was Jake, Mark's best friend since college. The two men had shared everything over the years: victories, defeats, secrets, and laughter. Where Mark was polished and composed, Jake was rough around the edges, his manner blunt and often abrasive. He had a quick temper, and though he could be charismatic in his own way, he was far less controlled than Mark. Jake's reputation was that of a man who said exactly what was on his mind. No filter, no pretenses. Tonight he was accompanied by his wife, Lisa, a woman who commanded attention whenever she entered a room. Tall, with a figure that seemed sculpted by a sculptor, Lisa moved through the crowd with an air of untouchable confidence. Her beauty was the kind that turned heads, and her charm was undeniable. However, something was different about her tonight. She seemed distracted, her movements somewhat mechanical. Every so often she would glance over at Mark, her expression unreadable, her gaze flickering away as quickly as it had arrived. The easy rapport that she and Mark had always shared was gone, replaced by an air of discomfort. The evening had started off as a celebration, with Mark eager to share the success of his recent business deal with those closest to him. The deal had been a big one, and Mark's ego was buoyed by the sense of achievement. But as the night wore on, something began to shift. A tension began to build, unspoken but unmistakable. Small remarks, half-formed sentences, a sharp comment here, a lingering glance there. It wasn't long before the simmering emotions began to boil over. Mark and Jake's heated argument started over something trivial, a remark that was misinterpreted, or perhaps a frustration that had been building for years. Their voices rose, louder, cutting through the music and the laughter, their anger simmering just beneath the surface. Claire, ever the peacemaker, stepped in quickly, her voice calm but firm. "That's enough," she said, her tone cutting through the tension. Both men fell silent, though the air between them still felt thick with unresolved conflict. Lisa, standing on the sidelines, watched the exchange with a neutral expression, but her fists were clenched at her sides, the knuckles white, as though she were trying to hold back something, a surge of emotion perhaps, or an instinct to intervene. She said nothing, though, choosing to remain silent, her gaze flickering between the two men. The cake was brought out shortly afterward, its arrival meant to serve as a distraction, a gesture to return the party to its intended atmosphere of celebration. But the mood had already shifted. The once lively conversations were now stilted, forced, and awkward. Guests spoke in hushed tones, their laughter now brittle, as though they were all aware of the growing rift between the two friends. Then, just as Mark raised his glass to make a toast, the doorbell rang, and the room went quiet. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the house like a bell tolling, signaling something ominous. Everyone turned as the door opened, and in walked a woman whom no one seemed to recognize. Her face was unfamiliar to most of the guests, and the sight of her standing there holding an envelope immediately drew the room's attention. She looked out of place, her attire starkly different from the elegant gowns of the others. Her hands trembled slightly as she held out the envelope to Mark, her voice cutting through the silence with an icy tone. "I think you forgot something," she said, before turning on her heel and leaving as quickly as she had arrived. No one moved for a moment, the weight of the moment settling on everyone like a thick, uncomfortable fog. Mark's face went pale as he opened the envelope, his hands shaking. Inside were photographs, intimate photos of him and Lisa, their faces close, their bodies intertwined in ways that left little to the imagination. The photos spoke of a secret affair, a betrayal that had been kept hidden for far too long. For a moment, the room was dead silent. No one moved. Then chaos erupted. Claire's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Jake's face turned crimson, his fists clenched at his sides as he lunged at Mark, shouting words that no one could quite make out. The tension in the air was palpable, each guest frozen, unsure of how to respond. Lisa, standing motionless in the corner, seemed frozen in time, her face a mixture of guilt and defiance. The party had ended, but the true drama was just beginning. The photographs were the catalyst, but they were merely the first domino in a chain of events that would unravel the lives of everyone present. The following days were a blur of anger, accusations, and emotional turmoil. Mark tried desperately to justify his actions, to explain away the affair as a mistake, a lapse in judgment. But the damage had been done. Claire moved out of their shared home, taking their 2 young children with her. The house that had once been a symbol of success now stood as a hollow reminder of everything that had been lost. Jake, his trust shattered, filed for divorce almost immediately. The rift between him and Lisa irreparable. The once close friendship between Mark and Jake was destroyed, and the group of friends who had once shared so much was torn apart. The bonds that had held them together for years were now nothing more than fragile threads, snapped and frayed by betrayal. In the aftermath, there were no winners. Mark lost not only his family, but his reputation as well. He was left with little more than the hollow shell of his former life. Claire struggled to rebuild, her heart torn by the betrayal, and the scars of the past would linger for years. Jake, once a man full of fire and energy, became a shadow of his former self, his anger fading into deep, unshakable sadness. Lisa, once the woman who seemed untouchable, now found herself alone, her confidence stripped away by the consequences of her actions. The party that was meant to be a celebration of success had become a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of how quickly lives can unravel when secrets are exposed. As the dust settled and the reality of what had happened set in, one question lingered in the air, unspoken but heavy with meaning. Was it all worth it?